Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Ms. Wonderful Film Club podcast. I am your host, Jana Marie Rose, and this is my guest, Katie McGraw. She goes by McGraw on this podcast this summer.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, McGraw. We're doing Rose and McGraw all summer, exploring the masculine with uh, films by Ethan Hawke and ending this summer excursion of films with the movie Wildcat and talking about this movie, Flannery O'Connor, who is the subject of the movie, and really getting into the difference between, the director's eye versus the actor's eye. And especially because this is a family affair, this movie. And that's really what inspired me to want to explore the films of Ethan Hawke, because I loved this idea of him as a father directing his own daughter, Maya Hawke, who is starring as Flannery O'Connor. So, what an adventure that this film is, just knowing
Mhm.
a little bit of the backstory. And it's very ambitious as well. Don't you think this is an ambitious thing to take on?
I do, because it's not a standard biopic where it's just linear and point A to point B to, her death. It's it's weaving in and out of her stories and making her a character in all of them.
Yeah.
So it's kind of giving you this sort of montage effect of her life and her inner thoughts
Yeah.
and character. So it's a lot to contain. But I thought it was really well executed and very striking when it comes to like just the cinematography and the way it was done, the
Yeah.
colors. Um,
I
and
agree.
it reminded me, oh, I was just gonna say, and it reminded me because it's Ethan Hawke, like it reminded me of First Reformed, which did he, I mean, I know he was in it. I think
Yeah.
he directed that
He
too.
No, he didn't direct it, but
Oh, he didn't?
he was the priest.
Right. Well, it had a similar kind of look
Hmm.
to it, I felt like.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I enjoyed this movie a great deal.
Oh, good. I'm glad you liked it, because when I first came up with this idea to explore his movies, it was because of the movie Wildcat that he was, promoting that, and I was hearing about it, and I thought, well, this is interesting, and then
Yeah.
I thought of you in the podcast because you are my best friend of 27 years or something, maybe more. And
Maybe.
and here's what I want to ask you, because we are, two friends who met in college and we were English majors. And so we
Mhm.
spent a lot of time discussing literature and watching movies and bad TV shows. I don't think
Yeah.
we watched too many bad movies, but there were definitely some bad TV shows back then, like that we would
Yeah,
spend
but
time.
good bad.
Good, bad,
Of
right?
its time. Of its time.
And so we're very just connected in terms of thinking about the world in a literary way and discussing texts. And the thing I remembered about you that surprised me was that you chose as your senior project, because we all had to pick, who are we going to focus on, what's going to be our final senior thesis, the
Mhm.
culmination of our studies, and you picked Flannery O'Connor. And I remember just like thinking, why? Because I could never really connect with her work. Like, I knew she was respected, she was a certain name, but I
Yeah.
never connected with her work. And I know that you had done a paper in a class on her, and you're like, I think I'm just going to focus on her for my senior thesis. I did Anne Sexton. So we still did people in similar generations. I think Anne
Oh
Sexton was
yeah.
older, maybe a little older than Flannery O'Connor.
Strong, bold women.
Yes, yes. And my approach for Anne Sexton was because she was a housewife and she seemed stifled and she was this poet and everything. But Flannery O'Connor, I just couldn't connect with her. So I'm really want to hear for you, as somebody who was like, I want to study her work a little bit more in depth, what was it about Flannery O'Connor that pulled you in?
It's like I have to really deep dive back to that time because I wrote that. I mean, it took forever writing that paper, and now it's like, why did I go for that? I mean, I think the Catholic thing was very strong.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I was able to immediately relate to her uh imagery and um connect it to what I already knew. Uh and also I just the contrast in who she was and what her life from the outside looked like to compared to what she would write, which would be so like violent
Mm-hmm.
and uh jarring, um but so interesting. I mean, she really feels like and she's still within the time period also of Truman Capote with In Cold Blood, where it's just so like stark how something so every day you're going about your time, you're with your family on a car trip, or some whatever. A good man is hard to find in that way. Um, and just out of nowhere, disaster, and you're killed.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm. Now
and
you're referencing A Good Man Is Hard to Find, the short
correct.
story. Yeah, yeah. Which
Yes.
is I think my favorite one of all the ones I've read. Favorite is a weird word to use, but I just think it's the one that I come back to most. But go ahead. You keep
Oh,
going.
well, of course. I mean, it has that line because I was rereading the line where it said that woman needed to be shot every day of her life. She might have been, like she might have been all right if
I
she'd been shot
know.
every day.
I
Yeah.
know.
And
Well,
that's the grandmother.
so okay. So and I want to get because that we're talking about the perspective when we talk about these films, I brought up three areas that I think are helpful in exploring it. As somebody who's taught English literature in front of
Hmm.
different audiences, um I I kind of take that approach. So perspective is like what is the perspective the movie takes, and then the kind of story of the movie. But before we get into the full perspective, it's helpful to just like know a little bit about Flannery O'Connor and your so it was that she surprised you. Is that what you kind of feel like what drew you to her? It was like that there was something really different, almost like a sword of some kind.
Yes. Yes. Well, it's like Christ with the Sacred Heart and a sword. Like
Yeah.
it's it's about Christianity and what is good, what is bad, and how we define that differently. And also just a certain brutality
Yeah.
that comes with how people are interpreting religion in themselves, in others, um, and what a good Christian person, quote unquote, is. And she's also got the added depth of the Southern Gothic, which,
Yeah.
it's in that sort of Faulkner kind of vein. So it's like I would say it's kind of like, oh, you see shiny picket fences and big wraparound porches and swings and sweet tea on the porch, and then you go inside and you go into the basement and it's like a dungeon and
Hmm.
horrible things are happening there. But from the outside view, it's just very like a beautiful patina over the people, and you wouldn't know
Yeah.
all of the horrible turmoil that is happening, but is also um, has elements of redemption in the characters and how I mean, they don't always grow, but you get a different insight into how just the humanity of it, I guess. It's just I, I'm trying to think of like, because there's so many stories that get kind of covered in the movie
Yeah.
and you go in and out of.
Yeah, which I love that they do that as the approach of the movie.
Yeah.
So the perspective, I mean, I think what I what is interesting about you sharing what drew you to Flannery O'Connor is that I looked at a couple of interviews before we started where people asked Ethan Hawke and Maya Hawke about, you know, the
Hmm.
seeds of the film. And it was Maya Hawke, who plays Flannery O'Connor, who had read the stories in high school. She said she was really drawn to some of the characters, and she was the one who approached her dad and said, hey, do you think we could do a movie about this? So it
Oh,
really did, yeah, stem from her. So there is something about that fierceness perhaps of the young woman artist, or the
yes.
young woman seeker, or you know, who's trying to understand the world. And I think that that is why the film has that perspective that you mentioned, where you know, it's the the mind of the imagination is
Hmm.
in her reality. It's hard to separate what story she's in her imagination.
Yes.
Flannery O'Connor as the artist, you know, who's the focal point of.
Right.
So she's always in her imagination, and the story just takes a life of its own, even if she's sitting in a doctor's office, or even if she's sitting in a living room with, you know, her mother. And I love the way the movie shows the same characters, almost like you would see in theater,
Hmm.
where people play different characters, but as Flannery O'Connor is, you know, delving into the mind of her, you know, her story, and she's in her own head, she's
Yes.
playing a character, her mother is another character, you know, all the people in
Her
her.
aunt is a
Yeah,
character.
yeah,
Like, yeah, she
I
just
love
draws
that.
them in.
I think that's awesome the way she does that. But um tell me why you see. I'm laughing because I just don't see redemption. Like, I didn't have the same upbringing as you. So when you picked Flannery O'Connor in, you know, senior year, I was like, that's
Hmm.
a Catholic thing. I just right away was like, that has to be a Catholic thing. Because as much as I was, you know, at times intrigued by the Catholic Church, I wasn't brought up in the Catholic Church. I had a little bit of interaction here and there. You know, I was baptized. I don't remember that experience because I was very,
No.
you know, what was I, like a couple weeks old.
Yeah.
Um, so I was baptized, and then I went to Catholic school for 2 years when we lived in the city, and I actually loved my Catholic school. I loved the convent. Like, I know I was a nun in a past life. I was so many things, I think, in a past life, but I know I was a nun because there's something about the quietness of the convent. Like, every once in a while, a nun would be especially nice to me. And one time I got to go in the convent, and it was like this magical, mystical place where the hallway was really
Yeah.
long, and there were these, you know, lights coming in from the windows of the nuns rooms, but I couldn't go in the nuns rooms, obviously. And
Right.
then and they gave me cookies or something, and I just remember thinking like, whoa, I got behind the golden door. It was like getting to the Wizard of Oz. And and then there one nun, and you have probably more experiences, but I'm just telling you because they were so minimal for me. So,
Yeah.
and there was one nun, she was really mean. She was
Hmm.
known as the mean teacher in the school. The school went to 8th grade. And my babysitter was in 7th grade. She was the one, Bernadette was her name, my babysitter. So
Oh,
she
very
would take
Catholic.
me, I know, yeah. She would, I loved Italian Catholics. I still love Italian Catholics. I mean, I just love them. They're like juicy to me. Like, you know what I mean? Like, they're like juicy people. But so Bernadette would take me to school and home from school. That was like
Yeah.
her you know, babysitting time. And one time I had to go into this nun who was a teacher. I had to go into the classroom and sit there and wait for Bernadette to be done. And again, that was like the secret. I got into the secret space where no other second graders got to go. And I
Oh,
got
yeah.
to see this nun firsthand. And she was actually the one who was really nice to me. And that day in the convent, she was the one who like got me the cookie. So I was like, see, they're not all mean. It was such an interesting exploration of what
Yeah.
faith is, because that was my only exposure as a kid, was like these little dots of faith and these beautiful stained glass windows. And I would have just like crumpled up in a ball and just said, "Take me now, God. Like I'll be a nun." I'm not even kidding, but we moved to South Jersey and then religion died. There's just not, it's a whole different vibe in South Jersey. But
Well,
you
yeah.
you had more of that. So I just remember thinking that you understood something about Catholicism, having gone to many years of Catholic school, and
All my life.
I only had that little tiny taste of it. Um
And we went to a Catholic college.
yeah, it was a Catholic college, yeah. But
Yeah.
but they didn't impose
It
it.
no, 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 no. I mean, because it's college, it's not going to get super, or at least it was a liberal arts
Well,
college, so they weren't going
and
to get super crazy about it.
like most Catholic things, money matters, right? So they're like, we're not going to get these girls money if we can't, if they're not allowed to have guests, if they're not allowed to have boys over, so like there was a lot of things where 50 years
Yeah.
before, you wouldn't have been able to have a male guest in your Catholic college dorm, but
No. I mean, there
we
still were rules, which probably wouldn't be the case in most places, but yes.
but
Well, the
yeah.
Catholic thing is, it's like, it's such an institution, and I'll just say it. I think I'm an institutionalist just at my heart. Like, I love a good structure. I love rules. I thrive in that. I just, I want to know what the score is
Yeah.
and how I need to adhere to it, work around it, but mostly adhere to it because I do like rules. Um, and so like with church, it's just I always went. We went every Sunday. Uh, and it's just it so part of my life growing up, but not in a like overbearing way. I think it's more overbearing based on Flannery O'Connor's experience, where she was going to church, I think, a lot more. Um, but for me, it was just like, this is just part of the routine. So like you're you're getting sort of a constant drip of I was gonna say Jesus, but that doesn't sound right. Uh
Of blood.
of blood and body.
The blood and body, yes, always, which is so morbid to me. No wonder she's a Gothic writer, because this
Yeah,
is
you
so
know what? That's
odd.
what it is. There's a certain morbidness that you don't necessarily think about when you're in the middle of it. And that's just what everybody does. Because you're like, blood and body of Christ. Yes, yes, yeah. Transubstantiation. We're all on board. Um, but like when you take a step back, it is kind of, oh, like it's kind of gnarly the way we are so like there's all these different rules and hierarchies within the religion and the church, which is probably part of what I like resonate with. Uh, Even though it's stupid, it's again, I like a structure. Um, but it is a lot of like crazy gross stuff going on when we're reading from the Bible, from the New Testament, or just like the Passion of Christ. And that's a whole thing where, we're talking about the crucifixion and the holes and wounds in the body of Christ. And it's just kind of like you can be like in second grade and we're talking about that and we're doing Stations of the Cross, during the school day and being like Jesus falls for the second time and then you got your rosary with you and you're just going through it and it is like, oh, this is kind of grotesque,
Yeah.
but it's just so, but it's also like so human too. Like it really is, it's the divine in the horror, I guess.
Wow. That's an interesting. Yeah, I guess that was always, as an outsider to any sort of organized religion.
Yeah.
I always, first, I just got really horrified by the politicization of Jesus and Christianity.
Oh, well,
And
yes.
so for me, it was like, for me to seek religion or any institution at that point was like, that was me having to overcome my own fear because I wasn't
Hmm.
in it growing up. I just
Right.
read a lot of horror novels and I read a lot of romance novels and watched a lot of cable television, which meant
Sure.
movies, so I didn't really have like the question, is there a God? I don't know. That would have been just something I didn't really put much thought into. But underneath it, I craved meaning, right? Or like a
Hmm.
sense of source, a sense of safety. So I do find something really odd about this. Jesus does say it, in later years. I've done my study of
Hmm.
Christianity. I've gone into many Catholic churches to pray because I do love a beautiful Catholic church. I was
I mean,
drawn
we
to
we
them.
love our icons. We
Yeah.
do. I mean,
Yeah.
unlike the Protestants, we do love a good statue, and
And I
stained
do
glass.
too. And the
Me too.
saints, yeah. I mean,
I love it.
there's so many feminine, excuse me, excuse my cough,
Mhm.
saints, and I would love to like see the saint outside the church and read the story of the saint. And,
Oh, yes.
and there's
And they usually
obviously,
die horrible deaths because they're martyrs.
yeah. Yeah.
But
So
it's so like heroic.
right. Yeah. It's very unusual and yet it's also really beautiful and there's so much there. But I find more darkness with these little flickers of light in Catholicism. And I think that there's a lot of shrouding in it of like what the truth is. And you really have to
Hmm.
do your own inner search to find what the truth is because the church is not God. And this is what I
No.
think is the story of Flannery O'Connor and what we're watching unfold in this movie, which I think is really beautiful because she's grappling with her talent and her faith and her tradition and
Hmm.
also all these questions about God. And I feel like her stories reflect not quite knowing all this
Oh, right.
time of like trying to grapple with it, but not quite knowing because there's not a lot of decency in these characters. And yet and the characters she creates, yet
Yeah.
she wants to be good. And here's the thing that I think is so interesting because I think a lot of us want to be good. We want to know,
Sure.
do I have the approval of the highest overseer of all, right? It's like we want to
Yes.
know we're okay. We're in good with the big guys.
Yeah, of
Um
course.
but I think that's kind of why the church holds such sway in it, the institutional aspects because it's do these things and you get there, but the
Yeah.
actual inner search for God and for the truth that Jesus speaks of as a teacher and a prophet and a healer, it's
Hmm.
really about doing all that work inside you. It's not, you can't necessarily assume because somebody's a priest that they're in good with the big guy. You don't, or the big girl, you don't know that
Sure. No.
because they're just kind of a figurehead. And I think that there's a little bit to me in the story of Flannery O'Connor as a person, and maybe that's I think it is depicted in the movie of not quite knowing God because she's grappling with the messages she's been taught that life is about suffering and that there's nobility in suffering. And
Right.
she wants to be a good Catholic. She says this to her priest.
Hmm.
And I think that's an amazing scene, by the way, with
It
Liam
really
Neeson.
is. Her and Liam Neeson.
Oh my
Great.
gosh, like not often do you see scenes where somebody is grappling with their faith and they have a person who's in a quote unquote authority about faith that they can really pour their soul out in front of them. We don't
Right.
typically see it.
And be understood and be
Yeah.
sold
Yes.
in
But
a real way.
Yes. I mean, I want to talk more about that scene, but the question, she says, how can I be a good Catholic? And I find that from my, Quaker standpoint now, as I've gotten older and I go to Quaker meeting, and I'm not putting any religion above any other. I just think there's
No,
appreciation, God's everywhere. You can find God no matter what path you take. But
sure. All roads lead to God, if that's what you believe in.
if you're and if you're
You're
seeking,
seeking, it's
yeah.
fine.
But my thought is that really the question? Isn't the question, how do I know God? And what a different question it is to say, how do I be a good Catholic versus a question, how do I know God?
Or
They're
how do I
two
be a good person?
Well, they're entirely different questions, and good
Oh,
person is
yeah.
in the eye of the beholder. So
Right.
that's not even you know what I mean? But it's
Yeah.
knowing God is what at the end, no, to know God is to know. That's the highest you can really ask for. But to be a good Catholic is a very different question.
Well, that can feel more like, am I ticking all the boxes? Am
Yeah.
I doing everything in the right order? But I think for her, Catholic and God and good person are like the Trinity all rolled into one. So if
Yeah.
she's saying, am I a good, how do I be a good Catholic? It's all of, how do I know that I'm doing the right thing? How do I know I'm in line with God and with the church? Like, so it's all encompassing, it seems like, for her. And it's funny that in her stories, and again, I would have to go back and and now I'm kind of going to, I think I will refresh myself on a lot of the stories where there, and you see it in the movie too, where it's like the more, not mega church Christian because it's not that era, but like the more Protestant-esque Christian revivalist type of person, she tends to have characters like that are not Catholic, but Christian, and don't always come out in the best light. Like when the maid in the story in their dining room is talking, and she's kind of like referred to in some ways as white trash, and she's talking about going to the preacher and so got healed and all that, and you can see like there's a sort of looking down on the woman in a way, not just by because then they have a story where she put the maid in it as well, like when they go into one of her short stories, but like where her you see her mom kind of in the dining room as the woman's talking, just kind of being like not impressed or sort of like cringing, like, okay, all right, you're that's fine, we don't need to worry about what John Joe did at the tent yesterday going down to the river, like whatever. It's sort of, I don't know if that's her trying to show what she thinks of people that are maybe in a lower class or religion that's different, or and it's negative, or if it's just to show a different aspect. But she does she does seem to, I mean, the Catholic thing, which Catholic in the South is also kind of not as big in my experience.
Right. Yeah.
Much less back then, I would think. Um, but it is kind of like more up, I don't know, what is she? She I feel like almost does feel like superiority
Who's she?
in Flannery,
Yeah,
the character,
I
and
agree.
the person, like a superiority in being not necessarily just Catholic, because she's also, they're like, I don't know, maybe upper middle class or something, but like that there is a sort of class system in her head,
Yes.
and that she's above it, but she's also trying to not be. I think that's part of in the priest scene where she's like struggling because she's like, how do I how do I have all these conflicting things basically and still be good and in line with what I should be doing? But at the same time, I'm going to write these stories, and is that really being good about the talent that God has given me, and just this internal conflict that's constantly happening. So that it is kind of like, is my religion almost, I don't know if she's consciously doing it, but yeah, thinking like, well, I recognize that there's a real caste system, and I'm trying to like highlight that because she does do that. And with racism, the same thing, but at the same time, she's part of it. So she's
Yes.
not fully removed. She's skeptical and she'll point it out, but then it is kind of like goes back to, but then you're still part of that system, or you're still thinking in terms of those tropes to a
Yeah,
degree.
she is to a degree, and I wouldn't even say to a degree. I want to tell you flat out how it feels to read her works. I just spoke to a man last night, and the word he used was devastating. He said Flannery O'Connor's stories are devastating. So
Yeah.
he's a writer and he's taught English for years. That's that was an interesting word because I thought I never knew how to describe them when I would be
Yeah.
teaching them. I feel that she hates people. When I'm not even kidding. To
No,
me,
I
what
get it.
emanates from that story, like a good man is hard to find. I used to sit on my porch when I was a mom with kids, teaching adjunct at these, community colleges, exploring short stories with 19-year-olds, who really didn't want to be there, most of them. Um,
Yeah,
but I always had my passion of like, come on, we're going to read a story today.
of
And I would
course.
pull, I had this, big, thick text of Flannery O'Connor short stories. And I would look at it on my bookshelf and it would haunt me. And I was like, that's the one. Yes. That's the one.
College.
Yeah, that's the one. So
I still have it.
I
It's got my
would,
name in it. Katie McCraw in like blue pen.
I would like, I would be like, I'm gonna figure this out. I'm gonna crack this code. I'm gonna read these stories, and I would like pull it out and I would read a story like everything rises much must converge. I'm like, okay, and I would just put it down and be like, this woman is, and this is what was in the movie as well with her mother.
Yeah.
This woman is an enormously talented writer. I mean, the precision of language, every sentence like a knight, every sculpted in so many perfect ways. The actual blood of the
Yeah.
story is I hate people. I hate people. I hate people. And I was like, I'm supposed to respect this. This is a woman writer in the 50s. She had lupus, blah, blah, blah. She hates people though. Like, what's the morality of the story? You can feel someone's heart through their art, I believe.
Yeah.
And I don't feel a heart in there. I feel a mind, a brain. But
Mm-hmm.
where, if you actually know Christ, if you're actually in tune with that energy, and maybe she's just a victim of some sort of abuse of or manipulation of what religion is supposed to be or what God is supposed to be. Maybe she's just victim to this manipulation, but it's in the heart. It's in love. And
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't some semblance of love come out for the characters if she felt it? I don't
Right.
think she has compassion and love. And that doesn't mean we shouldn't study her, but to study her as an anomaly of what a woman is expected to be as a writer when she's just kind of hate. It feels this way, hateful. It feels hateful. I hate people. I hate these characters. I have no compassion for them. I
Mm-hmm.
think Flannery O'Connor is the misfit in A Good Man is
A
Hard to
good man is
find.
hard to
She
find.
wants to kill that grandmother, so she does it. She created a safe space where she could come in there and kill off this whole family that she doesn't like. And she has the same attitude as the misfit.
Yeah.
That's what I feel from her. And, I have more compassion for that now. But when I
Yeah.
was years ago looking to stories as a teacher, I was like, well, I don't like the morality of this story, and I don't
Right.
know that I
Right.
want to keep reading it.
Look, she takes no prisoners, and she's not here to be liked in some ways. I mean, she wants to be, but she's also like, but I gotta just be me. Um, I think like and maybe I don't have this fully thought out, but with her stories, and as you see in the movies, or in the movie with the little shorts of them, it's she's most of the time skewering people that are saying, I'm a good Christian person. I'm a good
Yeah.
Christian woman, but I'm going to be super racist and like full of myself while I'm talking about this Black woman sitting ahead of me in the bus with her child. Even though I think now I'm being like so nice because I'm going to give this kid a penny because I don't have a nickel, and just be so in shock when that's greeted with getting hit by the mother's purse.
And you're
And
speaking, I mean, for anybody who's listening, this is Everything Rises Must Converge. That's the
converge,
short
yes.
story. Yeah, go ahead.
And being so taken aback because, and as a reader, you are, and when you're watching it, you're like, oh my God, like that wasn't great. But then it's like, but yeah, maybe sometimes you gotta get smacked in the face. It's too bad she has a heart attack or whatever later, and her son, played by Maya Hawke in that
Yeah.
story, is not as like he's not very sympathetic to his mother at all. But at the same time, it's like she's insufferable. And that doesn't mean she should deserves to die, but it is kind of like sometimes you got to get hit on the head to realize how demeaning you're being and racist
Yeah.
and just patronizing.
Mhm.
Um so I feel like with her stories, people are stand-ins for certain types. And maybe it's not like redemption stories in the way of like, oh, then the main character has a, change of heart, or the villain who started out like dark and horrible has some little bit of goodness that is shown. It's like, look, there's good and there's bad. And I mean, with Catholicism, especially back then, because this is pre-Vatican II that she was living in, uh, that's the way it goes. Like, it's not, let's have the softer side of God and Jesus and all of that. It is like suffering, and through suffering, it's a form of punishment, but it's also a form of that is a form of redemption in and of itself, which is kind of how she tries to view her suffering. Like, I am suffering through these things, but how I handle it is how I express myself, my love for God. And, it's all about how am I channeling these struggles to be a better Catholic or person. But she's very spiky. That's, I mean, and she comes
Mhm.
off like that as a person the in the movie, like Maya Hawke playing her. Very sharp, angled, like literally, metaphorically, spiky, won't suffer fools, but has moments where it's like saying sorry to her mother about speaking out of turn or being a little too sharp. Um, which I think it just feeds into the kinds of characters that she writes and kills, for
Right.
lack of a better
Yeah, it's a
word.
new kill your
Because a lot of
darling.
villains are living at the end of her stories. But it's
Yes.
also like, but are they just stand-ins for like Judgment Day of a sort?
Yes, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. I think it was Faulkner who says kill your darlings when it comes to writing, and she took that literally. And she did kill a lot of the darlings in her books. I think it's interesting to hear the way you view it. Um and I have to say I love a strong spitfire of a woman. I really do. I mean, I played Lucretia Mott in this play last year,
Mhm.
and the Quaker heritage has, these women. Feminism is dear to my heart. Not saying it's perfection, but it is about stepping up and taking up
Yeah.
your space, taking up your voice. Women artists who did that, who just spoke their minds. And there is and that's what she's doing, you're saying. I
Yeah.
really appreciate the kind of thought about Judgment Day, or you don't know how it's going to come. It's
No.
just, you're going to have to face your maker at some point, and that maybe the stories are meant to invoke some kind of fear for those who she's pointing a finger at and saying, this is you, the mother
Holding a mirror
who's,
up.
yeah. So the mother who's not wanting any black people on the bus, she's saying, read my story and know what's going to come of you, right? Or the
Right.
grandmother in A Good Man Is Hard to Find is, the grandmother's a liar. It's all about, I want to look like a lady. If I die today, let me make sure I look like a lady. So
Yeah.
it's about that superficiality, and the underlying message or morality of the story is, yeah, you might look like a lady, but
You're still going to be in a puddle of blood in a ditch.
yes, yeah. So
Sorry.
yeah, so I guess,
You don't get to pick it.
and I like, there's some couple lines in this movie where which I think is a testament to the writing of the screenplay, where when her mother is reading that story, and I feel like I've been the mother, like where I'm like reading the story, I'm like, are you okay, girl? Are you okay?
Yeah. Yeah.
And the mother's like, I just don't understand why
How
you
does
can't write
being, yeah,
something that
nice.
pe- people will like to read, and I feel that a little bit too. But I recognize that she stays in her zone of, this is what I'm doing and I'm going to keep doing it, because she says
Right.
something about, I guess you just want me to be a decoration around here. And it's, am
Right.
I like, I have this talent, this is how I'm choosing to use it, I'm sticking by that, and I'm not going to be your decoration of making the story that makes people happy, because that's not what I'm here to do.
Right. And
um
her mom respects it. I mean, her mom
yeah.
is reticent, but at least the way it's being played and the way, and Laura Linney, national treasure, uh, the way she comes across is like, I don't always get you, but you are talented and okay. Like,
Yeah.
again, I'm reading the story and I'm wondering some things, but
Right.
fine. And we'll be hitting up church on Sunday anyway. Like,
Right.
it's all good.
Right.
But it really is just, she's very, well, yeah, I would say with Flannery's character, right from the beginning, she stands in her own power because they start out at the publishing office and
Yeah.
with the editor, and he's like giving notes, which I also like that he's a little fearful or kind of like, are you open to me giving you notes if you want this published? And the fact that she then turns around and comes back, because you can see she's like just barely containing how much she is not liking what he is saying. And then just is like, no, turns around, comes back, sits down, and is like, I will not write this way. This is what I think, that it's, and it's respected again. And she's just uncompromising, which
Yes.
that's how she starts. That's how she ends. Like she wants to try to bend in certain ways in her personal life or try to fit in a little bit, like when she's at the party, um, in, with the guy that she has some kind of romantic vibe going on with, but then nothing happens. But I guess
I
he was
think
like a,
that's Robert Lowell. So when I was looking back over some of the history, I think she has that friendship with the poet Robert Lowell.
but his
And
name was Cal. I
oh,
thought that was somebody too. I'd have to
oh,
look at the Wikipedia because there's a bunch of
okay.
men from her writing. I mean, women too, but like I remember there being a bunch from like, I guess, doing the workshop stuff in
Yeah,
Iowa
yeah.
or Idaho, where she maintained like correspondence and friendships with. Um, but either way, when she's at the party and she's at the edges of the party, she's
Mhm.
not she is the misfit on that. Like she's not smooth and just willing or able to just dance in the middle of the floor or be super sophisticated like the guys, like Cal's girlfriend. She's other, but she's constantly observing and taking note of, like, you see her kind of clocking every single person, and in the movie they have that where like it sort of stops on people, the camera, like it's still like she's taking mental photos and then using that later in her writing. which I liked. I thought that was it was a good way to capture an internal
Yeah.
um, monologue for her. And yeah, so she's outsider, but she's like the smartest person. She leaves people in awe, like Cal. That whole thing where she's I loved when she's reading the story. Which story was it? It wasn't
I,
Everything That Rises,
I don't remember what
but
story
she
it
was
was.
in the lecture hall or room,
Yeah.
uh beautiful writing kind of room, very English majory with the fireplace and everything.
Yeah.
Like, love it. And it's all men in the
There's a
class.
couple of women. I did
There
see
were?
it. Yeah, because I thought
Okay.
the same thing. And there's a couple of women. Yeah. Just
All
a
right.
couple. Yeah.
But mostly you're just seeing herself like just at the lectern.
Yeah.
And when the one guy, because it's always like, I guess they give critiques after each story, and you
Yeah.
see the one guy in the back start to say, now what and then Cal go like, no notes, we're good. Basically, that's what he says. And
Let's
you
all go to
just see it.
lunch.
Yeah. Like, we're not here for notes now. Like, mic drop. That's mic drop.
Well,
She's
and
out.
she seemed to appreciate that. And then she just was like, I got to read my story. I don't have to defend myself. And let's just move on. And I like that.
Yeah. Like, I'm not even gonna have to, like, no notes. It's
Yeah.
just, and people are just looking at her like, they got struck by lightning. And it
Yeah.
is. It's like, maybe that's a negative, or maybe it's the best thing ever. I don't know, but something happened. And
Yes.
it's coming from this woman that is like not who it's coming from a package that you would not expect it to come from.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's really helpful because, the way we read things, the way we respond, and what we create, all these things, it says something about our inner life. And I think for me, what I'm appreciating in hearing you talk and what I think I'm appreciating in watching the film is, and this is why I'm so grateful that Maya Hawke and Ethan Hawke put this together, is that a woman taking up a space that is a difficult space to hold, a space that
Yes.
says, you don't know better than me. I am who I am. This is what I'm writing. There's a space for this. And I'm, like you said, uncompromising. This is where it is. This is who I am. I'm writing it and I'm going to keep going. And to leave people speechless over and over with,
Yeah.
and that's really what the work does. It kind of leaves you speechless. um that there's relevance, that makes it relevant, and she's not going to stop
Right.
doing that work. And it matters that someone holds that space. It's not the touchy feely warm love of God that I think is my understanding,
Sure.
but I also know that God is not always warm and touchy and huggy, right? Like that there are some hard truths that
Right.
we all must face as human beings, and the darkness and shadows we have to go through to understand being human. And she's willing to put us into the darkness to
Yes.
experience it, right? Yeah.
Right. Well, like in the scene with the priest, Father Liam Neeson, I can't remember his actual name,
Father Liam Neeson, yeah. He is
where
so great, by the way.
I
I
mean,
just
of
I'm
course, you got
just
the
so
Irish priest.
yeah.
He's like
And he's
perfect.
warm. He's warm
So
and
warm
yeah. Okay, I
and
didn't mean to interrupt,
understanding.
but we talk always about the acting in this podcast, and he embodies exactly what you want in a priest, exactly what you
Yes.
expect in a priest, right?
Right. Yeah, he's the priest that everybody would be like, in mass, or if you have him as a teacher at school, you're like, oh, the cool priest. I mean, not exactly cool, but like the good one. Um,
The line goes down the street for this confessional.
yeah, right, right, right. Like, I don't mind saying confession to him because he's gonna be chill about it and
Yeah.
not berate me or be like, why did you hit your brother that day? Like, it's like, this is not what you're meant to do. We're not having a conversation. You're meant to just tell me how many Hail Marys and Our Fathers to say, and some other act of penance, and let us be on our way and absolve me. Thank you. But
You've had these experiences in confessionals. I've been in a confessional probably like 3 or 4 times in my life. So, but you've had it where they start like a priest will question.
it's the one that stands out the most because it was my first confession. And I remember I picked going to the pastor of the church, Father Tuis, who had the same birthday as me. And I picked him because I was like, he's the pastor, like he's the head of the church and in our church and
I
like
want
the
the big
school too.
guy. You're like, I'm going for the guy who's the
Yeah,
highest
it's like an
up.
older man and with white hair and a white mustache and whatever. I think he might have driven a Cadillac, but that's neither here nor there. Um, I guess it was for everyone in the rectory. I don't know.
The shared Cadillac.
Maybe.
Yeah. Okay.
Unclear. It always looked nice. And this was all down the street from my house, so Anyway, I picked him, and I remember being sort of, I was taken aback, not as hardcore as I would be if it were Flannery O'Connor that I was confessing to, and she had advice for me, but just the fact that I was like, because you're like, what am I going to confess to? Like, I don't, because you're kind of like, I don't do anything that bad, but all right, like, did I say some mean things to my brother? Yeah, okay, so I'll say like 2 things, and then I'll add in like, I talked back to my parents. Like, it is a kind of calculating, like,
Yeah.
how bad do I want to get? And I was a good kid, but like, you are kind of like, do I really want to like bury myself in here? No. So what am I going to cop to? That sounds believable, but not terrible.
Strategy.
Which again, I feel like Flannery O'Connor should get like the punishment, the
Yeah.
crime. I wanna try and game it. And I just said something about like, yeah, I was fighting with my brother, my little brother, Steven, and I hit him and I was mad, whatever. I can't even like something along those lines. Typical. And he just was like, oh, okay. Well, why did you do that? I wanted to be like, that took me aback. That's when I was like, what? Like, I when we were studying to do first reconciliation, I don't recall there being like a Q&A. Like, I'm in 3rd grade. Like, what are you talking about? What? Why? We're not going to get into like, this isn't therapy. We're not getting into this. It's just supposed to be, I say it, you say, okay, try to do better. 3 Hail Marys, 2 Our Fathers, and you know, try to be kinder with your brother. Like that's what I was waiting for. And instead I got a like, why? And I was like, well, because I thought he was being, but then it's like, am I digging myself in deeper? Because then it's like, why did I do it? Because I thought he was being annoying. So I wasn't showing compassion there, I guess. It's like now my sins are doubling somehow. I just need to get absolved and clean and go over to the pew and say my prayers and get out. I got to get this sacrament done.
Oh God. Okay.
So, so that's a very different kind of situation. Like, I don't know. It was the 80s. You wouldn't think it'd be touchy-feely,
Yeah.
but it was a little bit like much. But with him, you'd be like,
What you mean the Liam Neeson
with
father
Liam
round? Yeah.
Neeson, well, maybe he would have asked because he was more conversational.
Yeah. I
But
mean, he was bedside. That was like, that is some service. It's
well,
not, you got to come
that's
to
their
church.
job.
Yeah.
That's why
He's
she
like,
thinks she's getting extreme unction. She's getting last rites because
oh,
he's
because he's under
bedside and
the,
she's been sick.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
she is kind of like, oh, wakes up, he's there, like, okay, is this it? Is this extreme unction? And he's like,
Yeah. Which,
no. I do like the way he's like, no, no. He's trying to be so reassuring, like, I'm just here to chat with you. Like, you're having a hard time. So then he is kind of becoming a therapist there. But like, I do like the idea of like the priest is kind of hanging by your bedside and you wake up and you're just like, uh-oh.
Uh-oh.
I'm getting my final sacrament of the seven sacraments,
Oh, well,
the last
she
rites.
so but that scene, I took a note. Oh, oh God, she says has some great lines in that. Like
She
that
does.
she's upset with the way she's upset with what she sees as hypocrisy and superficiality. I think most adolescents and young people, and maybe older people too, but I think at a certain point people become jaded. But when you're adolescent or when you're a young person,
Mm-hmm.
into young adulthood, you feel like there's a lot of hypocrisy that you're uncovering. And she says the church is a man's insurance plan. And I thought
Mm-hmm.
that that was really an amazing way of kind of saying, this is what I see as the problem. These people are going to church, but that's kind of what you just described a little bit. And I'm not judging you because I know your character and like I know your love as a person. But like it does, she's kind of saying, like, let me do the thing that gets me the thing that sits in the pew, and then I'm home. Come on already, right? And she says
Yeah,
that, and she's upset by that. And
because
she's
she wants
trying,
more.
yeah, she wants to really engage with those questions of faith. And she says, I don't, he talks about Jesus, and she says, I don't know Jesus. And I think that's really fascinating because I do think that sometimes the Catholic Church, in its formality, doesn't always illuminate the fire of Christ, right? That beautiful big heart of like going in and standing up for God and for truth. I think a lot of the side things that happen through the Catholic Church, taking care of the poor or providing shelters or having prayer groups, because I definitely did my own exploration of like these prayer groups that I found a lot of really good conversation. And those are usually led through the nuns,
Yeah.
whereas the formality of the church service is, through the men. But she's saying, I don't know Jesus. So it's interesting because if that was true, I don't know if her journals or something shows that, then she's trying to grapple with God. But the whole purpose of her faith tradition is a man who she feels she doesn't know. And
Yeah.
there doesn't, for me, of having more of a mystical or Protestant kind of approach and yogic approach, there
Mm-hmm.
doesn't need to be anybody standing in for you before you get to the truth of Jesus. Like you can just start talking to Jesus and asking questions. Now, different people have different interpretations,
Oh, yeah.
but it is a source of light. So I think that's fascinating too in that scene, because he feels for her. You can feel his empathy for her, and he just
So
prays over
much.
her. He just prays her. Let's just pray. Here's some pamphlets. You can read these. He wants to kind of come in and give the medicine to like help her feel more at ease because he knows what she's going through.
Right.
Um, and
I
that's what
liked,
comes. Go ahead.
oh, I was just gonna say I wrote down one of the quotes where she's like, I guess talking about happiness or joy, and he just is like, joy is sorrow overcome. And
Yeah.
it's very like, it's a very Catholic thing to say, I feel like. Like it is. Like there's the dark, you can't have light unless you have dark. You just have to
Yeah.
have that contrast. And through the suffering, we find joy. Um, and how would you know if you didn't suffer? And it is kind of like, I wish things could be cushier, but it's like, no, it's not going to be cushier, but because that's not life, actually. Like, life is going to be difficult, whether you believe in God or not. It's tough times sometimes. And it's so if you feel like it always has to be a certain way, it always has to be nice and easy, first of all, you're going to be disappointed all the time. And you're never really going to know real joy if you don't have the peaks and valleys of life. And I think with religion, part of its job is to give you something to hang your hat on, so to speak, for how do I get through this? What meaning can I ascribe to this part of my life when it's tough? because that's what keeps you, or for a lot of people, and speaking as a Catholic, like that's what helps keep you going. When you have tough times, you're like, okay, but I still have my faith. And through this suffering, I'm going to come out stronger. And this just means, in whatever weird, probably very messed up way, you're like, God just loves me so much that, he gives me these challenges. Or for her, like, you have lupus, you're going to suffer so much, like Jesus suffered on the cross. You are part of that too. And, but there is a reason for it. Whereas, a lot of times you'd be like, what is the reasoning? This doesn't feel good. But it's a fact of life. You're going to suffer, you're going to have pain, you're going to die. So it kind of is like, well, we're catering to that a bit in a way. And whether that's, I don't know, helpful or not, that I feel like religion in general and the church is like that. Like, let's give you, I mean, the church is even more so like, let's give you a guidebook, steps 1 through 20 of how to handle things. But like, I think that's, and that in that scene, she's sort of hitting on that. Like, how do I be good? How do I express myself as a, and be a good Catholic? But at the same time, I'm suffering and I find it hard to believe. Like, you're looking for a lifeline, you're looking for anything to help get you through. And she finds a sort of solace in it. But it's ugly, it's not pretty. I mean, just her life in general. Like, she has all this amazing talent and she writes great stories. And I really like when she has like different interactions, like with her mom, and is just very witty and kind of sharp, mean sometimes, I would say. You're right. But she's also dealing with being a woman, being a Southern woman, lupus, really being trapped in her body, and and having to be very limited in what she can do physically. So it's it's sort of like the life of a saint too, I guess. Like, you have to be struggling. There
Yeah.
has to be some problem. You're never a saint just by being nice and good. There's
Right.
always something that has to be. I mean, you're supposed to have a miracle, and there's like 2 or 3 other things that are like on the list. But most of the time, at least for the saints that you think of, they're martyrs. They've been stoned to death. They've been, persecuted in some way. And through that, they become divine or
Yeah.
more in line with it. So for her, I feel like it's a little bit like a saint's journey for her.
Yeah. Yeah.
But, a really like funny, quippy kind of saint.
Well, I don't see, yeah, I don't know. I just think with a saint, so I think Jesus's path is calling out hypocrisy and standing in truth, and knowing that in standing in that truth, if we get rid of some of the extremes of, you're crucified, et cetera, et cetera, it's really about, this is your cross to bear. She says this at the dinner table with the other intellectuals. She says people think faith is this like warm, goopy, like loving soup or something, but it's the cross, and
Yeah.
that's what faith is. And it's standing in your truth, even though it's kind of a battle. And she's definitely enduring that. I think Jesus did that, and then those who love him or those who follow in his footsteps, whether it's Christian or another faith tradition, are those who are willing to stand in their truth despite obstacles, you know, and not
Yeah.
kowtow to saying, well, because they want me to do this or that, I'm going to do this or that. Instead, they're, no, this is my truth. This is who I am, and I'm going to keep walking this path because that's what I'm meant to do, right? Jesus says, take up your cross and follow me. This is the path. So she's following that. It feels a little bit, though, that there's an intellectual aspect of trying to do that and trying to
Mhm.
grapple with it conceptually. And the difference for me is that the love is felt, right? When I read a poem by someone like Mary Oliver, um,
Mhm.
or I read a mystic, or I read, Paramahansa Yogananda, who became a Catholic as well in America, and you read his work, you feel the essence of a love coming through, and I don't feel love coming through her work, but perhaps it doesn't need to be that way. I don't need to read
No.
it
Well, she's
because
not
there's
evangelizing in a
yeah,
way.
yeah, yeah,
She's not here to give you morals to stories. Like, it's more complicated than that. And she's also just drawing a picture of snapshots from her life, which is kind of how it's framed within the movie. Like we talked about before, when it's either the movie slows down on certain people or just completely is still, and that's her taking in these people, these characters. um yeah, it's not to be like, and the moral of the story is don't be racist. It's like, sometimes the moral of the story is there's no moral, or there's nothing to, things happen. I mean, honestly, like, some of it, it's like sometimes you just get killed, and it's awful,
yeah,
and it's terrible, but it's just the way it is. And just saying like, oh, but this person is so good and they've done all the right things, or they say all the right things, so they should be safe. It's like, no one's safe. No one's safe.
yeah,
No one's saved,
yeah,
period. Because you might think
yeah.
you are, but you're not necessarily. And that's just our cross to bear.
Right. Yeah, I guess then she's in that vein a little bit. I mean, I guess because it's a woman, there weren't many women writing short stories and grappling with those issues, but to be compared to maybe Kafka with like absurdism,
Right.
there's
And as she
definitely some
talks about in the movie,
yeah.
like, under having a greater understanding, or doesn't she say she understands him more than Jesus?
Oh, maybe I missed that line, but that's a good wow. That would
I
make sense.
think that there's something like that.
That makes
I'm
a lot of
almost
sense.
right. Because it's like, now I get it. Like, the more I suffer, the more I get it
Yeah.
for Kafka. And it's like trying to make something good or artistic out of this pain and body that she's in. So it's looking for meaning. It's trying to be the best that you can. Um, but constantly having, worry that you're not measuring up as a Catholic, as a writer, as a woman. You know, you're not meeting expectations, and the, like, utter despair she sometimes feels at feeling like she's not getting everything done that she wants to get done,
I
which I
just
think is very common for women anyway.
I guess I'm just after I was finished reading her stories and the book and the movie. I just again, I had read her stories before, but I thought, let me try again and see what comes up for
Yeah,
me. I'm just really glad I'm living in the 21st century. I'm not,
sure.
I'm not. I just women have done a lot of work to establish these little like stakes in the ground here and
Mm-hmm.
there, and I'm really grateful to be a woman who's living in the 21st century because we have opportunities that women like Flannery O'Connor just did not have. I mean,
No.
he paved the way of holding a space at a time when women were not holding that kind of space and men weren't either. She
Yeah.
did something totally unique and rare not pleasing necessarily, and that I think is part of the strength of it is I'm not here to please you. I'm
Right.
not an ornament. I have my own fierceness and my own
Point of
approach.
view.
Yeah, and I'm going to keep putting that out there with excellent sentences and writing and not make you happy.
Right.
And art
Well, it
doesn't
is.
have
That
to
is
do
what you're
that.
supposed to. Right. Because if you're catering to the audience, then are you really getting your artistic point of view across? Or are you just, wanting to please people, which again is another common thing for women in general. And then in that era of being like nice and sweet and, cheery and not talking about murder and racism and classism and all these other things that she's talking about because that's what she's seeing. So she has opinions
Yeah.
and she's not gonna not say it, but it's jarring. It's jarring when it comes out of her mouth, and then it's certainly jarring when you're reading it. But
Yeah.
it's like, respect.
Yeah.
Respect. It is bleak. I'm not saying stuff like this like the stories or whatever. There's a bleakness to it. And in the movie too, because she died very young. And of the same disease that
39. She was
right. And her
39.
dad died really young too of the same disease. And it's terrible. And it was like a tough way to go. But it is kind of amazing that she still got done what she got done and still took joy in things like getting peacocks and wanting them, walking around the yard because that brought her joy. And even though her mom was like annoyed, like I feel like it was a very kind of intimate portrait of her, although not fully comprehensive as a like if it were a straight up biopic, where it would
Yeah.
be like childhood, growing up, like you'd have a scene where her dad is sick and dies, but you see some of that relationship and you see it's very like sort of montagey in a way because it's really more like let's tell her story through her stories and she's the main character in them.
Yes. And the thing that after what I always watch movies over a course of a couple of days, unless I'm in a theater, I tend to watch movies. I split them up. And what I felt so deeply was a sense of just gratitude for this movie being made. And to me, as a woman who's an artist, who's also had, a spiritual path that has had some significant impact in my life and the reaction of others to me.
Mhm.
Um, the fact that this movie is made in that it is upholding, it is giving this voice and resonance to a woman artist who is fierce and different and honoring her as a character and as a
Mhm.
full human being, because I think sometimes we can paint people with broad brushes, whether it's good or bad. Oh, this person is all good,
Yeah.
and that's not full humanity either, right? And
Right.
when we're trying to come to know what is God, what is Christ, what are these questions, it's challenging because we have to wrestle with shadows. We can't understand the fullness of anything unless we see some shadows and some dark edges. And what I think the movie does so well is just captures this artist. She's
Mhm.
an artist. She has her own way of thinking. She's in her mind, um, putting pieces together of stories. She's not necessarily nice. She's not necessarily what we want her to be. She's not fitting into any cookie cutter model. And to hold that space, it's rare. There's not a lot of people doing that. And also I felt that as a father, right, Ethan Hawke being a father who's typically an actor, who's explored being an artist, and that's what I like about him is the way he talks about his art because he seems very authentic to his art and
Mhm.
experimental in what he tries. But to then lay the foundation for his daughter to shine in this role that would have had to be complicated at times to watch your daughter be doing these very,
Some
to
of those
make her,
scenes, yeah.
yeah, to make her, ensure that she's good and she soars in a role like this. That requires a lot of emotional acrobatics that
I
I
would
think
think.
acting also, right, requires you to face all those things. So it's just, to me, it's very masterful, you know?
Yeah. No, I agree. I liked it. I oh, you know, the guy in the beginning of the movie, that's Maya Hawke's brother.
Which guy?
So in the beginning story where they show the guy running towards the car, he's got his shirt off, or
Oh,
he's a killer. I think he's maybe
yes.
he is the misfit. I can't remember now. Um, I was looking at him and I was like, "Oh, kind of looks like Ethan Hawke. I know he has other kids and she has a brother." So I looked it up and it was him too. It's
Ah,
like, it's a family affair. Also,
yes.
good looking family.
Yeah, it helps if you're a good-looking family.
It does help. I
But
mean,
well, and that is really the direction, in thinking about film and trying to explore it. I'm interested in exploring it in the way that it talks about relationships. And it's interesting to think of people who are in families who already have a certain kind of relationship, then
mhm,
having to take on these alternate relationships as they create together. I mean, what could be more kind of joyous and also transformative and also maybe triggering and also in the end like a fountain or something, right? Of
mhm.
creativity to work together on behalf of this bigger cause of art. That's really it's triumphant, I think,
Yes.
for a complicated story to be represented so well. I think Maya Hawke does an amazing job of acting in this role for such a young person to have that level of perspicacity. I love that
I
word,
know you love that word.
perspicacity. She
No,
really
she's really
gets her.
good.
She clearly really gets Flannery O'Connor.
Yes.
There's an intimacy with that artist.
She's bringing the same energy. I mean, I feel like she brings the same kind of energy to this or a similar kind as like in when they did Little Women and she was Joe,
I
which I
didn't
feel
see
like
Little Women.
you didn't?
I didn't know.
The one with Timothy Chalamet and
No, I'll have to watch it.
Saoirse. No, wait, she wasn't Joe. No, 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 no. This is the problem. There have been too many iterations of Little Women. I'm thinking of Little Women, it was on PBS or it was on TV she more recently, and she played Joe. The movie, Saoirse Ronan is Joe. So I was getting mixed up.
Okay, okay,
Excuse my mistake.
okay. Yeah,
One's TV, one's a cinematic feature.
gotcha.
But
Okay.
she's got that same kind of like, and maybe that's just because it's also Flannery O'Connor's sort of in that vein of strong, opinionated woman and not trying to just be squashed down into one box, one compartment, being more outspoken. And I feel like she did a great job with that and her physicality of the whole thing as well. Like
Yes,
as
physicality.
she's very just the way she holds herself when she's at the dinner party, sort of like uncomfortable, doesn't feel quite right. Um, she really, you can see she's like feeling out of place. And without her having to say, like, this is, I hate this place. You
Yeah.
can see it in her. Or when she starts getting sick and needing the crutches, and like when she was going up those steps, I really kept thinking, like, why aren't we putting her on the first floor for a bedroom at this point? My God, she can't keep doing this. And then when she does fall and she's like, I will never go up them again. Like, it's just like it's very well done. It's very real feeling. And you can see how incredibly trapped she feels by it and how much effort it is to do anything. Like just moving her stuff around in her room and she's like out of breath just to move, a piece of furniture, but determination at the same time. I thought she really embodied Flannery O'Connor, or what I would think it was like for her as, she was getting sicker and still trying to be productive.
Yeah.
So I thought it was well done on all parts.
Yeah, and I love the colors of it. I think Steve Zahn
Hmm.
is great in it.
Oh yeah, he
Steve
was
Zahn.
good.
Yeah, I guess friends and family join the crew, right? Because he's in a lot of Ethan Hawke stuff.
Oh,
But
is
he's
he?
just such he is, yeah, because I think they've just been friends probably since Reality Bites or something like that. And
Oh, right, I
so
forgot
he
about that.
shows up in a lot of the stuff.
Oh, and
So
Cooper Hoffman.
he's missing the arm. He's the guy missing.
Yeah, right. But then there's the one where Cooper Hoffman, Philip Seymour Hoffman's son, plays the salesman who steals the wooden
Oh,
leg, which I was like, oh, this is the wooden leg one, right? And then,
oh,
you see it running across the field with her wooden leg, and you're like, God, that is such a
yeah.
crazy story, too. But it's so interesting.
It is interesting.
Thinks
It
of that.
is. It's like what that man I felt, you know, it was interesting because a writer and man who's like, oh, her stories are devastating. It's the right word.
It is. It is.
Devastating is the right word, and I think
Yeah.
it's heartening, it's powerful, it's enriching, and it's unique to see the intimate life of a woman artist on the screen
Hmm.
in the way that this was done. So I'm just really, really excited about it and happy that it was done.
Yeah.
Um, as a
Me
woman
too.
artist myself. Yeah. So let's finish with our script. You know, I
Mm.
always write a script. I don't know, it's just for fun. I like throwing things
Just for
together
fun.
for fun.
Now I've got to find it.
So this script um is this is so cheesy, my title, Rise Up Through the Noise. Flannery O'Connor in retrospect. I had this vision of her like she's not a painter, but I wanted to put her in like the space where you'd have some big title and people would walk through a gallery. So I was
Hmm.
trying to imagine that, which is why I made this fancy title. Um, and I have these characters. Lisa Atkins, she is 40 something, the owner of a boutique in New York City. She loves art. She caters to wealthy women, but finds many of them frustrating and ungrateful. And then Flannery O'Connor is 20 something writer visiting New York for a writing workshop. I don't know that all the timelines have worked out here because I would have had to do a lengthier search, but I think they kind of line up that this could have been plausible. So
Uh-huh.
the setting, because I like to think of stories that aren't told, right, from what we watch. The setting is the Metropolitan Museum of Art. That's in New York City. And it's a Sunday afternoon in autumn in the late 1940s. Lisa and Flannery O'Connor are in a wing of the Museum for Medieval Art. Both women have stopped in front of a painting, Madonna and Child by the Italian painter. Oh my gosh, how am I going to say this, Katie? Duccio di Buoninsegna.
I
Duccio.
think that's decent. Buona
Duccio di
Segna.
Buoninsegna. Yeah, so okay.
Segna. I
Bu-
don't know. Duccio.
Buoni- Buoninsegna. Yeah, we just call him Duccio. Duccio, the Duce. All right. So you, so, so I am Lisa, right? And you are going to be Flannery.
Okay.
Okay.
Let's see how this goes.
Yeah, let's see how this goes. You have to talk in a southern accent. I get all scot free here. Okay.
Oh, do it.
No judgment, no judgment here. I'm in New York. I don't have to talk in a southern accent in this. I'm Lisa. All right. It's magic, isn't it?
Not sure about that.
You don't like it?
Like is such a parochial term. What I like or don't like doesn't matter. It's art. It is meant to be looked at and revered.
Why do you think you can't like or not like something?
I just don't think in those terms. They are too limiting.
Really? It is limiting to decide if you like or do not like? Tell me more.
I am a writer, miss. I am meant to describe experiences on the page. If I was obsessed with what I like or don't like, I'd never write anything because I don't like most people and most experiences.
Ah, yes, I can see
What can you see?
an unhappy person.
What does unhappy have to do with anything? We are not on this earth to be happy. We're here for a higher purpose.
Okay, interesting. So, when you look at this painting, Madonna and Child, what comes up for you?
I think the mother here looks very tired.
Mother Mary.
Yes, I suppose it is Mother Mary. She looks tired and weary, and Jesus looks like an old man in a little baby's body. No baby has a face that ugly. Maybe Jesus was ugly. Maybe we're all just ugly. I think the painter is depicting a very unhappy affair.
Yes,
This is devotional, and if this is an unhappy affair, what is it for me to say what I like or don't like?
we're all meant to suffer, I suppose.
I suppose.
You know what I like? Milkshakes. There is a corner store that sells them, and I've been stopping by every day after work. Every day. I drink a chocolate milkshake every day.
Wouldn't know it to look at you. You're thin as a rail.
Yes, I like being thin. I like drinking chocolate milkshakes. And I think you're right. I don't like this painting. I thought I was supposed to, but I don't. It makes me sad.
Well, making you sad isn't the worst thing a painting can do.
No, it is not the worst.
I like chocolate milkshakes too.
Do you want to leave the museum and get one with me?
I do.
Good, let's go. Maybe we will see a painting somewhere we like. Probably from some artist selling his work on the street outside.
Don't you know it?
Oh my God, I adore you. I adore you with the southern accent. I adore you.
I don't know what kind of South I
It
was
was
going
great.
for.
I loved it. I had to like stay in character. I don't know that I stayed in character perfectly, but I had to say it because I was like, oh my God, she's doing a good job with this. Good job,
I
McGraw.
have my moments.
You
You're
pull out,
welcome,
you got your
Rose.
chest, you got your tool chest, and you just pulled out a nice wrench. I just or a screwdriver,
Interesting.
or I don't know, whatever you want to call it.
No, I liked the wrench thing. I just was like, you went for the whole, you kept going with the metaphor, and I appreciated it.
Yeah, sometimes you need a good wrench. Whenever
You
I
do.
need a wrench, I give you a call.
That's right. Very handy. That's what they say about me.
As always, it is such a pleasure. And thank you,
Yes.
anyone who has listened, anyone in that wide universe who has
Hmm.
listened to us speak of Flannery O'Connor, of the movie Wildcat. By the way, the name is awesome. Wildcat, right?
Yes.
It's great.
I liked it.
Yeah. Um, I guess any of us are wildcats when we step out of our prescribed role and do something a little outside the norm.
Yeah,
And I think the movie is giving permission and celebration of those who are wildcats.
indeed.
Definitely. Um,
Wild. Wild card, wildcat.
yeah. Yes, wild there's space for wild. We need to sometimes get in touch with our wild nature because from there great creations can come. I think that's what Flannery O'Connor shows
I agree.
in her work.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you for listening. This is the Ms. Wonderful Film Club podcast, and this concludes our exploration of Hawk Summer. So, from starting to talk about masculinity and picking one particular actor, Ethan Hawke, and the evolution into him as director and his daughter, right, kind of taking the reins
Mm-hmm.
and demonstrating um, prowess. This has been,
Yes.
yeah, this has been an adventure and it's been fun. And really looking into literature too and seeing the overlap with movies and literature and the way one and the other can nourish one another, can highlight different aspects, can give us nuanced understandings, the different art forms. So this has been fun. And I do want to give a plug for my book, which I just revised and republished. So it's a new edition, Letters to a Young Woman from Paris. And this book is I'll show you the cover. I designed that cover. How cool
I
is that?
know. I like it. I like
Thank
the
you.
color.
Um, yeah, a woman who is in search of her own soul tries to give some lessons to a younger woman who is in search of hers, right? So older woman to younger woman, and this is inspired also by Letters to a Young Poet from Rainer Maria Rilke, because it's
Mm-hmm.
really about art and our society and religion and how women can come into their own. So I definitely see some overlap in what I've tried to do in my own spiritual journey and ways that I hope it can help young people either now or in the future, right? We never know
Yeah.
what kind of impact we can have. Um, but thank you for listening to the Miss Wonderful Film Club podcast. And you can listen more or read the post on mswonderful.substack.com. And keep coming back. We'll see what the future holds. We'll see if there's new themes, new ideas, new actors or actresses to explore. But thank you very much.
Very nice. Thank you so much for having me.
Bye bye.